So a little bit about me, just a smidge. I am one of those people who basically is a traditionalist, right? Who basically has become a recovering traditionalist. And over my years, I started out as a developer. I've gotten to understand security, operations, DevSecOps. I was doing it, and I was trying to talk to people about it, but it really didn't have a name, and I didn't even understand how to talk to people because I only really started to understand what it meant to be human like 2 or 3 years ago. So you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. I might get geeky and kind of speak some weird language, so you might have to stop me. Rugged came out, and in 2011, I worked for a company that rhymes with Pony Hay Station. So you can imagine that Rugged became something super exciting for me to understand because somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, April 2011, Rugged became the way out. It became the way forward. And I worked in an organization where DevOps was being practiced, but it was kind of being called Agile and Scrum, but it was really DevOps. And so I would think that what was interesting was security being practiced was really difficult. The conversations were hard. We were doing things like application security. There's tons of facts to know about April 2011, and what I'll tell you is we weren't all that bad at security. In fact, we were 3 weeks away from going to a new data center with security. And what I'll tell you is people make mistakes. It only takes one mistake for us to get owned. It takes literally one mistake. We have to be 100% right. Attackers only have to be right once. And that means that the odds are stacked against us. So this is a little bit about me. Set the stage. Software is eating the world. How many know this already? You're all application security folks. You've seen it, right? Our profession's getting bigger and more engaging, and there's a lot more software out there. Open source is becoming a big deal. You can go out on GitHub and probably find most of the libraries that your companies are leveraging every day. I know, by the way, how many people contribute to those open source libraries security bug fixes? Wow. One? I saw one. That's kind of sad. And it's really something that we need to change. And so I'm here to tell you that as a security professional, we used to hold our cards really close. We don't like to share. And as a recovering traditionalist, software's eating the world. This is a passion of mine because I have 2 children. And one of them is 18 months old and has already had her PII stolen. That will change your mind real quick about how many bugs you fix in open source. It will change your world so drastically that everything you do will be live, breathe, and eat putting security into software. So you can already see I've had some PTSD from security issues. And along the way, what I've learned is DevOps is on the rise. And I feel very passionate about this because where I've started to see security really take hold in the software community is through DevOps. In the last year alone, there's been a 1,500% increase in the number of DevOps jobs. Isn't that crazy? Oh, and by the way, every single person in this room is being hunted because of DevOps. You'll have many more opportunities because of it. And what's even more incredible, because this actually looks like the curve that AWS talks about in their keynotes. Have you seen it? Like cloud is going up, and all of our data is moving into these environments, and we've got to do things a lot different. My organization went all in on the cloud, and so did many more organizations that I worked for. And what I've learned is that to work with many people, we have to think about where we're all moving, what the problems are of the future, because what we do today isn't going to get us where we have to go tomorrow. And so ultimately, that means we also have to figure out how to change. I wasn't really big on changing. I've evolved over time because of sheer necessity. You would say that I'm one of those people who have evolved in my career, in my skill set, in my mindset, in all the things that I do, just simply because there was no other option. Remember, when I started back in the day, there weren't a lot of people like me. I was super young, I was female, and oh, by the way, in my computer science class, the first one I ever took, I was one of 100. And so that's a really difficult thing to do. And when you start thinking about this, this is also another opportunity for us to change the way that we diversify how we bring security to the front lines, right? There's not enough of us, but that's because it's not really been an open society. Security needs to evolve to the point where we're changing the world. I also remember when Josh Corman said this, and shout out to him because he's pretty amazing, and if you haven't had a chance to see anything on him, which I doubt anybody in this room hasn't seen a Josh Corman talk, but if you haven't, you need to. He said this, and I remember when he said it so viscerally because I actually realized that I was going to need to change careers. And I was like, do I go back to dev? Do I go back to ops? Do I become a biologist or something and get all the way out? I'm actually, I went to school for biology, so that's kind of an option. I also went to law school because that's something else you do when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're evolving, right? I learned that that was just really not a career option for me. So this is the end of security as we know it. Holy crap! What are we all going to do? And then I realized, and I kind of took a few moments to realize what he was trying to say, and later on, I went to another talk. And what he said the second time, and this is when I really kind of heard him, was this is the end of security as we know it, and isn't it a good thing? What? We could change the world if we got security to be everybody's responsibility, and it's our job to figure out how to make that happen? Okay, sign me up. Security is viewed as the proctologist. How many here wanted to be a proctologist? And by the way, you ended up here whether you wanted to or not. I love understanding other people now. I didn't have enough appreciation growing up for what other people could bring to me and what knowledge I could gain from them. And that rainbow picture at the top is really offensive to me. And I really hate this because it means that we're losing. This is how people view us. We're at the end. And we're not at the end in a good way. I don't want to look through poop every day. And by the way, that's what it kind of looks like when you do a job like ours. I want to go talk to people about what they're doing, about stuff that they're building, and helping them to make decisions. Now, how many people get invited to their development team to be part of the crew and make decisions about their business? That's a good number. You know why? Because last year I asked this question and it was literally 0. And that means that we're changing and evolving as a society of security professionals. I'm hoping this goes away, and I think you guys can help me. So when I realized that I was a proctologist, I ended up realizing that it had to change, and I started asking people, so this rugged DevOps thing, what is it exactly? And I couldn't get a definition. And then I got asked, what's my definition of it? And ultimately, along the way, all of the folks that I've ever worked with in security have always been trying to do good in this world. I came from working with a variety of people, but one of the most transformational times that I've had was at Exodus, where I worked for Bill Hancock. And Bill Hancock, I actually got up after a speech like this, ran after him and said, I have to work for you. And he looks over and goes, who the hell are you? I'm like, huh, there we go, it's an introduction. And ever since then, I've been banging my head against the wall, and I have a placard in my office that looks exactly like the bang your head here. And so, you know, all the cat pictures, you're gonna see some cat pictures because I had to bring them in. Where's James Wickett? Because, oh, that's great. You're gonna laugh, right? We've decided that I can either be funny or I can be informational, and I'm going to try and do both today and teach you something. And I'm hoping that the lessons you learned today, you're going to spread and make viral. And we have to. And it's your job too. So what's the definition of DevSecOps? So remember I said that rugged, I asked everybody what the definition was. And I've asked everybody what the definition of DevOps is too. And what I've gotten out of rugged is it's basically a variety of things, but it's about putting security into software. And what I got out of DevOps was it's collaboration. What you'll get out of DevSecOps is it's safer software sooner. DevOps, rugged, DevSecOps. And by the way, I don't care what you call it, if you do something that puts security into software, awesome. And if you haven't seen it yet, and you need to, there's a TED Talk on basically the future of learning by Sugata Mitra. He's incredible. And what he tells you is that we're basically building the wrong kind of people in our schools. So every person coming out of school is coming out with this very structured understanding of what it means to learn. They don't come out necessarily being collaborators. We give them math, English, science, in other countries, other languages, but basically our learning structure has been centered around building people who are replaceable so that you can ultimately have a surplus of resources. And then we all get out into the working world, a lot of us in the computer technology field, and find out that all those skills, they're kind of interesting, but there's this new collaborative thing that's happening. And so there's schools that are starting to evolve and change, but Sugata Mitra really makes a lot of great points. And what he's basically said is that if you dropped a computer in the middle of of some sort of third world country, and you plugged it in and all you provided was power, and it's called the hole in the wall computer, I think. But you really need to watch this talk. And the reason why is because what he found out is that if you just drop that computer in the middle of these camps, that children would teach each other how to use these computers literally with no instruction. Whether or not they knew how to speak English, they would teach themselves English to be able to leverage computers. Holy crap. And oh, by the way, if they can teach themselves, all these things that we've been learning about are about us solving bigger problems for the world. And oh, by the way, control is dead. So figuring out how to work with folks that are committed to financial reporting is essential. And oh, by the way, a lot of these articles don't really talk about that. But it's one of the biggest issues that we face as folks that are doing security. And so I'll talk a little bit about that later. So by the way, because we just have to have the obligatory cat pictures, unicorns suck, right? They're really hard to figure out. How many people really need to know what's in software to be able to do your security job? Assets are really important. Libraries, dependencies. If you're figuring out how to do security the right way, you need to know what's in stuff. So, by the way, unicorns suck, because they don't like to tell you it's all magic, right? DevOps is all magic. We're going to all learn together, and we probably won't document too much, because that kind of sucks. And yeah, all right, fine, but you got to be there, and that means that a lot of the ways in which we're working, we got to figure out ways to make it so it's sustainable. And as a sustainable thing, that means that we've got to figure out how to document our code. That's right, commenting. I hate reading code where there's no comments. Please, God, comment your code. And if you can do anything for security getting added to DevOps, work on commenting. It's a big improvement. And there's a reason why, because somebody puts their decisions into the code that you're looking at, and that means that sustainability over time is us as security professionals putting our security rationale in the code that we're actually looking at. How many people actually go find a defect and then put in a comment in the actual code to say, that's the vulnerability I found and we fixed it and here's why you don't want to change this particular method call? Anybody do that? Yeah, no. You might want to. Us versus them. So there's a lot of leadership books out there that talk about us versus them. And usually they talk about it as something that's kind of derogatory. And they talk about it from the standpoint of people being in teams, in companies, being competitive so that they can survive. Because companies ultimately need to get to outcomes and bottom line. And that means that we're driving a culture of us versus them, but really the us versus them that we need to worry about is attackers. So the us is security plus DevOps plus everybody else in your company. And oh, by the way, being the security professional that's really the police and enforcer isn't all that attractive because your us is something that most people don't want. So trying to figure out how to make your company more secure and be part of the us of making it secure, whether or not the business idea is stupid, because we all, by the way, I don't know anybody who's a security professional who hasn't got stupid in their blood. Like, and I don't mean like they think they're stupid, they think everybody else is stupid. I would say I'm actually recovering from that. It's a long, hard journey, and ultimately we're all going to have to figure out how to do it. But so attackers, again, going back, they only have to get it once right. That's it, once. And you're broken into, and oh, by the way, lateral movement, all those things, right? Kill chain. Now, how many people have flawless, perfect code that they either look at every day or that they build? No, not me either. Because coding is hard, so we all make mistakes. And by the way, an attacker only has to get it right once. So how do you drive down having a mistake and making it better so that ultimately attackers have less to get after? Now, it sounds kind of doomsday, but I will tell you that there's plenty of opportunities to make it so that the attackers have a hard time finding all of your mistakes. The things you have to be perfect at are a lot less than you think. So I like to think that the us versus them is all about, you know, how we identify with each other. Having fur as a cat is kind of a big deal, but if you're a unicorn, you need a horn. So now we've actually driven towards security professionals having to have fur and unicorn type tendencies. I think that it's important for us to realize it's probably part of being diverse for us to be part of the club. So not everybody has to look like each other. Cultivation takes leadership. So how many people think they can get their company to invest in having security professionals that do DevOps, or more importantly, help to secure DevOps? I'm one. I got a few more down here. That's awesome. By the way, seeing a huge trend towards this. Companies are realizing that the skills are out there, but not enough of each one of them. So as a security professional, we've all been driven towards specialization. Application security is a specialty. By the way, there are specialties within specialties because we've gotten to the point where it's really hard to find the obscure thing. And ultimately, DevOps needs a bunch of security generalists. And you should know how to do continuous delivery, and you should know how to publish software. And oh, by the way, you probably need to be able to have new skills. So I can tell you that when I hire folks into my organization, because it has invested in trying to cultivate talent like this, the first thing I look for is, do you know dev? Do you know sec? Do you know ops? And that's kind of the way in which we look at our talent pipeline. When we deal with this, it's kind of different interviews, right? Can you imagine interviewing people and trying to apply, well, let me see, do I hire you for security? You're a developer. What do you know about security? Or you're a security professional, but you can't write a lick of code. How is that going to happen? We've hired all of them. There's one question that you really need to understand to hire your security talent, and this is an area that's really hard. What are they passionate about? And if they're passionate about safer software sooner, guess what? They're going to get up every day and they're going to work on their development skills, and they're going to work on their security skills, and they're going to work on their operations skills. And sometimes they're going to work on it not even at work. People go home every day at my organization and they work on their skills. I call it the private hidden projects. You'll know them because they're out in GitHub and people are contributing, and it's a really different way of operating. But they're all always building skills. And that means basically that if you do nothing else to get security into DevOps, to get safer software sooner, if everybody's trying to build skills and cultivation is not necessarily an option because we saw only a couple of hands here, then competence is an important aspect. And I put the heart here because people are passionate about building skills. I want to learn from the absolute best people I can put myself in front of. That means I better have very cool friends. And oh, by the way, they better know a lot of stuff. And I have a really high bar. And I'm kind of short, so maybe my high bar is not that high. You know, Wicket, you should have my high bar because maybe it'll be a little higher. If I stand next to him, it's really, really sad for me. So, competency. You got to respect people. Remember that thing I said earlier about stupid? If everybody else is stupid, how are you going to learn from them? And by the way, everybody has something for you to learn from them. Everybody. And what I've learned is I used to have this in my makeup because security folks don't trust other people. Something happened to us along the way where we just don't trust. And I think to myself, like, this is a behavioral, ingrained, like, fully intense behavior that I have to unlearn every day. Now that person's got a point. Yep. Okay, I got to reconsider this. And oh, by the way, that used to take me a long time, and it's gotten better over time because I've really worked on it. Every person you come in contact with, your janitor, your trash truck driver, it doesn't matter because everybody has something that they're super good at. And if you change your mind that you can respect people for what they have to tell you every day, then ultimately you're going to go from, I think at one point it took me years to really value other people, to now it probably takes me only a few minutes to realize that this person I'm sitting in front of has something truly worth listening to. That listening thing, super important. I've gotten in the room with many people where I've determined, like, this person thinks that I'm stupid only because they literally talk until the end of the meeting. I hate meetings. I have a no meeting culture. So you're sitting in a meeting and you're like, you know what? I can't teach this person anything. The agenda says that I am not that valued, and somehow I'm going to have to make a difference. So I'm always the person who now sits in a meeting where somebody else is talking. It's a really long meeting. It's about an hour long. The person talks for 59 minutes. And then they say at the very end, have any questions? And I'm like, yeah, how can I help you? It's the only question you really need to ask. How can I help you? It's a conversation starter. By the way, at 59 minutes, that person all of a sudden goes, oh, yeah, we should have another meeting. I have a no meeting culture on purpose. We knock down all the walls. We knock down a bunch of offices in my location. Some folks like it. Some folks hate it. I think I've gotten 90% of my crew to like sitting around a table, listening to other people and learning. A learning culture is really difficult to foster because it means that people have to listen as much as they talk. Getting your brain trained around that so that you don't just want to hear yourself talk is hard. And it's one of the most critical things we have to do. So competency. If we're going to learn a bunch of things together today, and by the way, I'm going to sneak in some vegetables here. So some of my slides are going to be meaty. They're going to have a lot of words. I will definitely give you a link to this if you ask me later on, so that you don't have to take notes. Some of the slides are actually going to be pretty dense. This one's pretty easy. If there's nothing else that you do, zone your software out. And if there's nothing else you do, instrument it. If you actually could see attackers taking advantage of your software sooner, couldn't you do something about it? By the way, that C right there, these are grades. We do stuff with A, B, C, D, F, and very intentionally. Not because we think people are stupid, but because it's ultimately a universal language to talk about how somebody's competency is utilizing grades. Universities don't get it wrong. They have figured out how to train us to do things and measure that. So why not use it? I have tried to talk to people about CVSS, and the conversation starts out with, hey, you have a 7.2 vulnerability. And oh, hey, by the way, that's bad. And the person's saying, well, I don't know if I agree. I think I have a 3.4 because you sent me the calculator and I don't agree with your assessment. And I always get taken back for that because I say, well, that's great because the 7.2 was actually exploited by my red team. So I think it's still a 7.2. Does it really matter? Now, if I told you this was an F, would you fix it? And by the way, unanimously, every person I've ever asked that question of is like, yeah, I would look really dumb in front of my leadership if I didn't fix an F. Oh, okay, great. CVSS. Now, I have a mapping for CDSS. We have all kinds of ways to figure out how to stuff stuff into these grades, and a methodology that's produced really interesting prioritization principles. So it's really pretty great. Build attack maps. I didn't say threat models. I know I'm standing in front of LASCON. Threat models are awesome for us. But have you ever tried to get a developer to spend time threat modeling and continue and maintain it? How many people have been super successful at that? Oh my gosh, like 0. Okay, so I had this experiment that I ran. I went into a room. I didn't train anybody on threat modeling. I gave them a piece of paper. I put a few boxes on it, and I said, tell me all the ways in which your software could be attacked. These are folks that don't speak security. They came back after 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And I didn't send them off one by one. I sent them off in packs, like DevOps. And they came back, and they had these super detailed attack maps. And I'm like, you know all the bad decisions you made. That's awesome. And by the way, I said, well, would you be willing to share that with me? And they said, sure. Awesome, I can test your stuff now. Okay, and then I went to my red team and I said, hey, what do you know about the business? And they're like, not a whole lot. And I said, all right, so here's a game for you. Could you go out and do some reconnaissance and tell me what you find out about our software? And they'd come back and they basically built something that looked like this. And I'm like, oh my gosh. DevOps, security, common language, attack maps. They take 10 to 15 minutes to do. They don't have to be perfect. They can be iterated. As you learn, they're going to evolve. They're going to get better. And oh, by the way, they can get included in things like README files and, I don't know, an attacks.md file. And oh, wait, those are things that you might put in a code repo. Pretty darn cool, right? Artifacts are awesome. So my red team does this every time they have a target. And our developers have been looking at doing this. Some of them are actually trying to do threat modeling, and then they've realized that takes a lot of time, and then eventually they end up over here. I did this for many, many companies, and I've gone back to see if it stuck, and it has stuck. So I can tell you it takes a while to evolve it, because we keep sending out the message that folks need to do threat modeling, and I can tell you that's an awesome exercise. It doesn't necessarily keep up with the speed of continuous delivery. Continuous delivery, security. So if Fred Astaire is dancing forward, publishing software, right? He's moving to the right. And by the way, all of his tools are super sexy, and they're really good, because that's where we invest our money and time, is into the development pipeline, so that we can get to customer outcomes and generate revenue. Security goes the opposite direction. So Ginger Rogers, backwards and in high heels. Yeah. So security goes to the left. We're building trust and confidence into our pipeline. And if you're not doing it well, you're probably way over here at the right. And moving up to the left side is really hard. And our tools, there's so many of them. By the way, if you're building a security tool, I really need you to build a good REST API. I have sat up night after night working with security tools, realizing they don't do good REST. Bring a developer into your crowd. Security professionals write software like that, and they don't ask any questions of a developer that might actually know how to write a REST interface. So they're kind of cool people. Developers can help you. So if you're doing that, please do it better. Because I've wrestled with a lot of these things like, hey, by the way, if I'm going to request a scan, you shouldn't make it so difficult for me to get the outcomes by putting in 3 different calls, and I have to know some number to get it out. Because that's going to be really hard, and it requires complex coding, and some people have a hard time doing that. So this is kind of the cauliflower part of the conversation. If you've noticed the vegetables at the very top, I'm kind of sneaking them in. You'll see why that's important later. And I'm going to give you a clue. That rainbow poop picture that pisses me off, yeah, it comes in later. Continuous security feedback. Who likes spaghetti? Yeah. You eat tomatoes, right? Who doesn't like tomatoes? You probably don't like spaghetti, right? Or that's how you're getting through your tomatoes. But ultimately, the feedback loop is an important part of the process. If you're DevOps, the feedback loop is how you actually get information out of your software so that you can make it better. The security part of that feedback loop, that Intel highway, is how you actually get your information into the feedback loop. And by the way, security information is in the actual feedback loop, but that intel is also super important and critical. How many attackers are hitting your software? Most developers struggle with figuring that out because, by the way, that takes a lot of time to sift through that information and really discover what it is. We've gone through the effort of figuring out how to put our vulnerabilities and defects right next to a number that shows how many attackers are hitting our software. Because at the very high levels of our organization, that can be a really awesome thing because an SVP or an EVP or a CTO or any of those folks that are looking at that information can immediately go, huh, I have 500 problems and I get hit with 250,000 attacks a day. Oh, I should invest in security. So super interesting, very critical. And oh, by the way, if you're trying to get your development team to put that information together, they don't have the time. So that ultimately means that security professionals have a responsibility of figuring out how to make it easier to digest the security information and outcomes and measurement data to help a developer. Test your code like everyone else does. By the way, a total shout out to Chris Gates and Chris Nickerson. If you don't have a red team, you should get a red team and you should watch that video. It's about an hour long, super funny. It's at BrewCon. We do a lot of red teaming. I usually have redder hair, but I'm kind of due for an appointment here. And so if I'm going to sneak things in, I'm going to tell you that you probably don't want to eat poisonous mushrooms. You probably want to find out before you eat those mushrooms that they're poisonous. So you get a red team to attack things and figure those things out. Cats. Got to bring you back to the cats because I think cats are kind of fun. I'm allergic to them. Ultimately, though, vegetables really, a cat doesn't like vegetables. I'm just going to tell you, put a vegetable in front of a cat and they're going to kind of give you the finger. And it's a kind of fun thing to watch. I love companies that dedicate towards solving customer problems. I'm not excited about insecure software that comes out that is said to be secure, and by default, it's not. Imagine that you found out that your software that you're using, your service, isn't very secure, and how do you collaborate with the environment and the provider that's going to actually make it better? Well, you kind of have a scientific approach. You have to figure out how you're going to trust something. You don't just go and listen to somebody and they say, hey, I've got these like 150 controls built in, and oh, by the way, it's great. Yeah, by the way, your software, your service is actually on the public internet by default. It loads up with a dashboard that has a default password, and it gets broken into in about 8 hours. There's hundreds of customers using this software. Well, we should work on it. So four months later, that software was secure. And I'm super excited because we helped a cloud provider make this software better by simply asking the question, like, how did you get to trust this? And they're like, well, we build perfect stuff. Oh, okay. I don't know about that. I want to go measure it, right? So as security professionals, our thing is to measure and to talk about it and to figure out how to make it better. If you ever do something interesting, corn, go Google corn and poison. You'll learn some things. Super interesting. And so what I would tell you is you can't just trust that things are good. Go and educate yourself. Do the experiments. Work with other people who know these things. Reuse. Shout out to Sonatype because they provide me some cool data. You know, you got to understand how to look at your software. How many people look at the manifest in their software and understand the libraries very carefully? I look at stuff all the time. If you're not, your organization is probably using a library and then reutilizing it and reutilizing it. And oh, by the way, the rest of your organization is probably just continuing to leverage that because they don't know any better necessarily. No one's telling them. And oh, by the way, they don't have time to go test everything. They do sometimes get information in from vulnerability scanners about what they need to fix. And then, oh, by the way, refactoring. John Stevens from Cigital has this really cool information about how to make software better. And a lot of the things he'll tell you is that you end up refactoring your software to make security fit in later in the pipeline. About 75% of your code gets rewritten. Whose organization has 75% extra to make software more secure after the fact? Not going to happen. So what's interesting is if you're a security professional, data is a key component. Having a lot of information, sifting it the right way, and getting to high fidelity makes you a king. Developers will love you if you don't waste their time. If you want to know where we're headed as a profession, it's getting to better measurement. It's figuring out how to have high fidelity, prioritize defects so that people don't waste their time on stuff. Forecasting what's going to get attacked. Who's good at forecasting? Oh, it's a really cool skill. Telling people what they should spend their time on is kind of interesting. It's hard. And I go back to what Chris Gates and Chris Nickerson are talking about in their video. And what I'll tell you is they're talking a lot about the same thing. And they leverage the MITRE attack framework to do it. Kind of cool concept. I like the attack framework. I don't kind of use it yet in my environment because we leverage the kill chain, trademark out, I think it was, who's got that one for me? Kill chain? Lockheed. Awesome. Thank you. Tongue tie. So like zucchini, this is an important part of the concept. And we leverage kill chain to do it. High fidelity comes out of understanding whether something is exploitable, whether it can be exploited. And the rest of it's interesting, but you should utilize your red team to take all that information and make something of it. Don't waste people's time. Now, I will also tell you that most vulnerability scanners tend to find feature gaps, but we don't talk about them that way. We talk about them as vulnerabilities. We've gone to defect and feature. If you built your software so that my vulnerability scanner is finding feature gaps, I'm going to actually send you a feature gap in your backlog. So we've gotten trust with our developer crowd by simply trying to get into their backlog. What we did was we said, hey, you can come to our system to go look up your defects and your feature requests, or we could put them directly into your backlog. And at first they were like, well, we'll just come to yours. And then they realized, well, we can't prioritize properly, just put them in ours. Win! We put defects straight into our backlogs. That means that developers own the responsibility of prioritizing the work of security. That's a big difference. How many people do that? Awesome. About 20%. That's a big change from last year. Speaking developer, how many people code? Ooh, this is a cool crowd. I want to hang out more. About 50% raised their hand. I bet it's actually more in this crowd. Everything is becoming code. So I know this is really hard. We've had security professionals in my group that have had to learn how to code. One of my requirements to work on my team is you must code. And if you don't code, you have a year to figure it out. And I remember one person took me up on that and said, I am a super valuable security professional. That's right, I'm kind of a big thing. And I'm like, that's great, you don't code, you're out in a year. So he's like 9, 10 months into it, no coding. And I'm like, so what are you gonna do in a couple months? And he's like, you're kind of kidding, right? And I'm like, no, you're gonna code. And in the next 2 months, he learned how to code. He's pretty awesome. The company that he now works for really appreciates that he codes. But that's not because he didn't code, it's because he's a pretty great resource. Now, I will tell you that ego is part of the challenge of becoming really good at something. So working on the ego thing, big deal. I will tell you I make mistakes all day long, every day, and I'm the first to admit that I could be made better just by simply having people tell me that I can be better. I love conflict. I love working with people who will tell me that I suck. I absolutely look for those people. I'm like, you know what? You just told me I suck. We should be best friends. And they're like, but you suck. I'm like, yes, I know. Make me better. We should be looking for the people that make us better. And oh, by the way, as security professionals, you can make developers better. You don't necessarily have to tell them they suck. Find a better way. I still do the you suck. And so I'm kind of known as the queen of criticism and feedback. And it's gotten me a long list of people to work with. And at first, people thought I just thought they were stupid. And what I'll tell you is you have to find a way to have people understand that if you truly care, you're going to give them feedback. At our company, feedback is a gift. When I first got there, I was like, feedback's a what? Ugh, somebody's going to tell me I suck? Okay, and we foster that culture, fabulous. And then I realized what they meant. If somebody truly cares, they're going to tell you that you could be better. And that means having conflict and telling somebody that things could go better means that you care and you love them and you're going to build competency with them. So finding a way to foster that is important. Sometimes you can do it through simply having developers speak, going over and telling somebody how they could build better code and helping them see the refined way of doing something does have a benefit. So focusing on the work can have a big effect on that. Translate security into something that doesn't sound like security. ABCDF, super useful. Make decisions and put them on paper and share them. So if you know that you need to have encryption and you need to have all these things, actually doing this is part of the process. And so what I'll tell you is giving somebody a B means that they say, you know what, I've got other features that are more important right now. When that grade gets lower, I'm going to do something about it. And watching that grade get lower allows them to take risk in the right way. So if you want to do risk balancing, this is a good method. And by the way, trending and all the cool things, by the way, you're going to have to code to really leverage the data that's going to help you to do this so that it's useful and effective. So anybody who didn't raise their hand, you really need to code. Whoever raised their hand should be helping the person who didn't raise their hand. Bonus. I actually didn't think beets were all that good. Candy cane beets turned out to be pretty good, and when I was unhealthy, I actually had to drink beet juice every day. And I realized that I didn't enjoy it. Shocker. And over time, I kind of got to like it. But at first, it was really disgusting. And so I've learned that it's actually made me healthy again. It took me a year to get back to where I am. And I also realized that if I found a way to sneak in a vegetable that was really important, it was put 80% of security back into software by simply focusing on 5 things. 5. Because that's what one hand will allow me to remember. And by the way, most people can remember about 5 to 8 things pretty well. And 8 is where you start to degrade. But at 5, you could absolutely have them remember enough to make their software better. If they look at these 5 things while they're coding, that, by the way, they might actually remember to do them. Understanding their zoning principles, having good asset management libraries, manifests, figuring out how they're going to do logging and instrumentation. Oh, by the way, one of the most important critical things is that you have visibility and clarity. And then finally, the authentication thing. Super critical. I do kind of wedge in identification and authorization in that little bar. I didn't put them all in because, by the way, if you do authentication, well, you have to solve for identity and authorization. I get both. So encryption, most developers focus on encryption because encryption is the silver bullet, right? No. So encryption solves about 3 things. It's the cherry on top. And when you think about that, that means that you do need it. It's really important, but only for a select number of attacks. So having people understand that the bottom of this pyramid is super important. It's actually what keeps the pyramid alive. That zoning and containment, you're hearing about Docker and all these different things. Those are awesome from a security perspective. If you don't know those containment technologies, you should. That is the bread and butter of security in the future. Benefits of DevOps plus security, we've had about 50% better results from doing these things. And that's from basic measurements across a pipeline that ranges from 30-year-old software to brand new stuff that's built every day and continuously delivered. And I like to focus on this because I think it's what actually makes people really interested in trying to make these things better. So, damn, DevSecOps, I'll have to fix that later. So I really didn't like the picture. If I could make it so that somebody was out of that picture was the security guy that's the janitor, make your poop biodegradable, and all of a sudden security is actually built in. All the vegetables really do help. If you go to a proctologist and talk to them, you know what they tell you to do? Eat your vegetables. Shocking. So we had a vegetable for every single one. I would tell you that if you utilize a recipe, you don't have to worry about the poop picture that everybody else says that security practitioners are proctologists, because ultimately proctology as a field will go away if we just eat our vegetables. Awesome. Mind-blowing. Yeah, new world, right? DevOps can be such a great thing for our field. We need to embrace it. We need to do it every day, and we need to help it be more secure so that software can be safer sooner. If you do nothing, join a group, contribute to the conversation, think about it. And I can tell you that if you do nothing, it won't get better. Find 2 people to talk about this kind of thing with. Make them better. They will make 2 people better, and we will figure out how to do this as a society and make attackers go away. I can tell you for my children, they're going to appreciate all the hard work that you do to make this a reality. So thank you so much for your time today.